One of the most important aspects in the world of Elden Ring is the ever-present ebb and flow, the push and pull of light and dark, life and death, the chaos and order in all things. Like yin and yang of Eastern thought, these dichotomies are not actually separate, but flow into one another. They are causality and regression in eternal loop. These elements are each aspects of the Divine One, the One Great. These divisions exist on a grand cosmic scale, as well as on a personal level within the soul of every living being. We are all each an extension of the very universe we are born into. While these concepts exist as philosophical divisions for the most part in reality, they are given shape and form in Elden Ring. The philosophical and theoretical becomes manifest in this art. The cosmic and personal expressions of these divisions is important to the story not only of our Tarnished, but to the gods and demigods that affect the fate of the world. The divisions of the self we see made manifest in Elden Ring are the persona, the ego, the anima or animus, and the shadow. These are the personal philosophical divisions. And for those who are paying attention, these are of course of the Jungian model. These Jungian archetypes are plainest to see in Elden Ring's Empyreans and gods. We have discussed the anima and animus of the Empyrean in the past when we discussed Radagon and Saint Trina. You can find out more in my Demon Souls of Elden Ring video. To summarize, an anima or animus is a balancing aspect of the self. If a person's self is largely masculine, they would have a feminine anima. If a person is the opposite, they would have a masculine animus. Each person is a combination of these two things, of the self and an anima or animus. We see this clearly in Marika. She is depicted as feminine and has Radagon as her other self, an animus. We also see this with Miquella, who possesses the feminine Saint Trina as his anima. Today, however, it is the shadow, which represents the repressed and hidden qualities of the self, that's the focus of the video. Together, let's attempt to uncover the nature of Shadowbound Beasts in Elden Ring. I think Elden Ring tells us quite plainly that Shadowbound Beasts are tools created by the Fingers to control Empyreans. This is to keep their actions, at least their persona, the outwardly expressed self, in conformity with the Golden Order. We see this weaponization of the Shadowbound Beasts with Blaidd when Ranni defies the Two Fingers, and Blaidd himself goes rabid, though he never betrays Ranni. So what exactly is Blaidd? What is Malekith? How are these Shadowbound Beasts created and given form? I think these Shadowbound Beasts are created by binding a living beast to an Empyrean's unconscious, the Jungian shadow, making them, well, shadowbound. E.G. himself states this as fact. The Two Fingers gave Blaidd to Lady Ranni as a faithful follower, her very shadow, incapable of treachery. But if Lady Ranni, as an Empyrean, resists being an instrument of the Two Fingers, the shadow will go mad, transforming from a follower into a horrid curse. But why would the Two Fingers have a need for this creature? Well, the Two Fingers seem to be quite rooted in place, and would need some kind of measure to keep Empyreans in their place. Making the most hidden desires of an Empyrean manifest and turning those desires into a weapon, into taboos, would ease the task of keeping an Empyrean in alignment with the Golden Order. Fundamental religions such as the Golden Order are no strangers to using the quote-unquote dark desires of a person against them. Now we must wonder how these beings were created. I think we can receive a clue with the most unlikely of creatures, I'm of course speaking about hobbits. Just kidding, from Bok, the demi-human seamster. But before Bok, let's backtrack and discuss beastmen. We must recall that beastmen were granted intelligence per the Cinquedea item description. Short sword given to high-ranking clergymen of Farum Azula. The design celebrates the beast's 5 fingers, symbolic of intelligence once granted upon their kind. The word granted is important, as it must mean that there is a force that can give evolution to a creature, give intelligence, something that can expedite the workings of the crucible of evolution, perhaps using a quickened reincarnation to hasten transformation and refinement that may otherwise take millions of years. So where do we see such quick transformation in Elden Ring? Honestly, in many places, but I want to focus on something tangible to our Tarnished in the time of the Shattered Elden Ring. I'm of course thinking of Bok, and his transformation using Renala's reincarnation rituals, which use the Amber Egg. The Amber Egg states that it is an amber egg clutched by Renala, Queen of the Full Moon, great rune of unborn demigods. Perfects those who have been born anew. Children born anew by Renala are all frail and short-lived, imperfect beings, each and all. We learned during our time as the Tarnished that the Amber Egg uses larval tears, which look a lot like wombs, to allow one to transform through reincarnation. In essence, through being reborn. Larval tears themselves are made of the same silver as mimic tears, making the larval tears objects of mimicry. Perhaps they are mimicking a womb. Curiously, the larval tear counterpart in the Land of Shadows is born from spirit graves, linking it again to reincarnation and the continuation of a soul. The purpose of reincarnation in various religions can be very crudely summarized as a refinement process in which a soul seeks liberation from its eternal cycle of reincarnation. From the Crucible to the Empyreans' path to the asceticism of the Hornsent, much of Elden Ring is centered around ascension to elevate a being. In Elden Ring, perhaps a quickened version of this refinement may, in short order, transform a beast into a beastman into a man, and a man into a demigod, finally into a god. While the Great Rune of the Unborn Demigods was a part of the Elden Beast, which is the Elden Ring itself, I think it was perhaps used to reincarnate powerful souls that were hewn into the Great Tree. But while the Great Rune is apart from the Elden Ring and outside the hands of a god, it can only be used through artificial wombs to imperfect effect.
In the end, Lady Renala was left alone, cradling the amber egg Lord Radagon bequeathed her. Now she devotes herself to it through forbidden rite, the grim art of reincarnation.
The children created by Renala's use of the amber egg possess defects. As the Great Rune description states, they are frail and short-lived. I think this is sadly because Renala is not a god, or even a demigod. She is a powerful astrologer and able to channel the full moon, yes. But she is not an Empyrean and thus does not hold within her the divine essence of a god. And thus she does not hold the power to wield the amber egg completely. So why do I think the fault lies with the master and not the rune? Well, as we know, Bok sadly dies after being transformed by Renala. And if you complete Bok's quest in this way, you are a monster. The Tarnished, however, does not die no matter how many transformations they undergo. Perhaps this is because they are blessed by the grace of Marika, a god. Or perhaps it's because they are burgeoning on demigodhood themselves. Godfrey ascends to demigodhood after becoming Elden Lord. So too would our Tarnished. And the Amber Egg seems to be most effective when being used in relation to demigods. It is the great rune of unborn demigods after all, and our Tarnished is not yet born a demigod. So I think the great rune of the unborn was used to transform the first beasts into beastmen of Fair Mazula, where they became their own race of people in time. Now, what does this have to do with Bok, and how is Bok related to this if he's a demi-human? Well, regression and devolution occurs in the lands between. I think this regression of a man is what caused the birth of demi-humans. Naturally, if a demi-human were to reverse their devolution, they would become a human again. We see this again with Bok, when he is transformed by Rennala into a human. But what does this have to do with Shadowbound Beasts? Well, I think the great rune of unborn demigods, while inside the Elden Ring, the Elden Beast, was also used to create Shadowbound Beasts. I think we can consider these beasts to be demigods themselves, as they are partly the Empyreans they were created from. Even Sarash, the regent of Godfrey, would have been a demigod because Godfrey himself was elevated to that status. I think a reincarnation and rebirthing ritual was performed on beasts to meld them with the essences of the Empyreans' inner shadow. Perhaps even using other parts of the Empyreans' unconscious, parts of their anima or animus. And this is why both Marika and Ranni's beasts appear masculine. The melded creature is birthed from this ritual as a shadow-bound beast. I personally think that all of Ranni's animus was melded into her shadowbound beast, a wolf. This is why Blythe is so human in proportions compared to Malekith, who is more animalistic. And this is perhaps why Blythe could resist the control of the two fingers. He was in the end too much of Ranni, an Empyrean. Perhaps this was an experiment to see if further control could be exerted on the Empyreans after some issues with Marika. Now we arrive at another question. Why don't Miquella and Malenia have a shadowbound beast? Well, simply put, because the Amber Egg was in the hands of Rennala. It was, I think, purposefully plucked from the Elden Ring by Marika and was sent away to be kept out of the reach of the two fingers by an unwitting Rennala. Now that I've told you my wild theory about the Amber Egg and the twisted creation of Shadowbound Beasts, let's consider who or what was the first Shadow Beast. The tradition of beasts bound to the shadow of Empyreans must have come from someplace. Well, I believe the first Shadow Beast, not bound beast, came upon a star with the first gleaming child of the Greater Will, Metyr. The mother of all two fingers and finger creepers was in turn a magnificently gleaming daughter of the Greater Will, and the first shooting star to fall upon the lands between. When Metyr was introduced in the Shadow of Erdtree, I was incredibly confused. I, like many others, was under the assumption that the first star to crash into the lands between was the Elden Beast. This came from the Elden Star's incantation. It is said that long ago the Greater Will sent a golden star bearing a beast into the lands between, which would later become the Elden Ring. This admittedly does not say anything about being the first star, but we were also lacking the awareness of Metyr's existence, so it was impossible to think otherwise. However, I still believe the Elden Beast arrived on that first star, arrived with Metyr. As I'm sure you've guessed by now, I think the Elden Beast is the shadow beast of Metyr, but unlike the Shadowbound Beasts created for the Empyrean, which are beasts twisted and bound to the shadow of an Empyrean through a dark ritual using the Amber Egg, the Elden Beast is more akin to a Radagon and Saint Trina type entity. It is a part of Metyr's true self, her unconscious. She is a servant of the Greater Will as its child, and her shadow is the vassal of the Greater Will because it is a part of her. Just as Radagon is America's champion and Elden Lord, it is a pure part of Metyr in the same way Saint Trina and Radagon are a part of Miquella and Malenia, respectively. Metyr and the Elden Beast are halves of the same whole, meant to exert order on the lands between. I believe the Elden Beast represents Metyr's deepest desire to place all life into perfect order, in hopes of pleasing or perhaps grabbing the attention of her heavenly progenitor, the Greater Will. However, I do think this is to no avail, because I don't think the Greater Will as a being that maliciously wants to control things to create perfect order. In fact, I don't think it wants. I think it's merely a part of the universe, a part of the One Great. It's the universe's penchant for ordering itself. FromSoft rarely, if ever, depicts anything of nature as being evil in the sense of cruelty with malicious intent. Most things in FromSoft games, even the most heinous, are often gray, allowing the player to make their own judgments based on their own morality. For me, chaos and order, life and death, light and dark, these concepts are like volcanoes erupting, stars exploding, or galaxies colliding. They are not evil. They're neutral, no matter how much they may frighten us, cause us pain, or leave us in awe. They just are. Now, if you're on board with anything I've said so far, and even if you're not, we must hold this theory to some modicum of logic. So you may be wondering, if the Elden Beast is indeed a part of Metyr, why is it separated from her? Well, in my humble opinion, I think the Elden Beast left Metyr when she was injured. We can see this injury during one of her attacks when she rips open her wounded abdomen. On this note, I do subscribe to the theory that this was done by the scions of the Eternal City, and is what the Fingerslayer Blade was created for. You see, we know that runes can be gestated and birthed in a way, with Fia, Goldmask, and the Dung Eater as our examples. Perhaps the Elden Beast was the same. As Metyr's shadow, and as the Elden Ring, it was gestated inside of her. And eventually it was severed from her by use of the Fingerslayer Blade. We know that runes in Elden Ring can exist in a physical sense and a metaphysical sense at the same time. Perhaps when the Scions injured Metyr, it was like cutting off the Elden Beast's umbilical cord, its connection to Metyr, who both is its mother, its progenitor, and its other half. Just as the self-shadow can only exist by the self existing first. I also believe that it is the time of this injury when she became unable to contact, for lack of a better word, the Greater Will. Or perhaps a better way of putting it is that she could no longer hear or see the perfect ordering of the cosmos, as she herself had become imperfect and disordered. A part of herself had been removed. It is also interesting to consider that perhaps the wound on the Elden Beast was not inflicted by Malenia during the Shattering, but was an echo of the wound inflicted on Metyr. Just some food for thought. I think like Radagon and Saint Trina, the Elden Beast was able to be separate from Metyr before it was ripped from her. The Elden Beast served as her champion and warrior, just as Radagon served Malenia. Though separated, it was still a part of her, just as Radagon is still a part of Marika and Saint Trina is a part of Miquella. However, both could be divested and were. So when Metyr was wounded and the Elden Beast, which is the Elden Ring, was removed from her, it took up residence in another vessel, a new divine host, the Empyrean Marika. And perhaps it did not do this willingly. Perhaps it was stolen. In conclusion, I believe that the Elden Beast abandoned Metyr after her downfall and took up residence in the body of a new vessel, Marika. I think Shadowbound Beasts were created by twisting and melding Jungian shadows and the unconscious of Empyreans with beasts using the Great Rune of the Unborn. And this is a practice that started after the severing of the Elden Beast. In turn, the Shadowbound Beasts that were now created were used as tools of control for the would-be gods. However, all did not go according to plan, for the will of a person is not so easily controlled. So let me know what you think. Is this theory way too off the wall, or did something in it ring true? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Also, thank you for being so patient. It took me a long time to make this video. I just had so many issues with the audio, but in the time that it took me to make this video, I refined a lot of my thoughts. Even though some of them are still a little bit confusing, I hope you enjoyed anyways. If you like this video, please give it a like. If not, a dislike. And if you want to see more, please subscribe.